This is episode 233 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
I'm president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, I guess the pace of news is just going to continue to pick up as we hurtle towards Election Day. Traditionally, Labor Day is the time when presidential campaigns get full throttle, full steam ahead. Of course, that's been blown out of the water for many years in the United States as presidential campaigns seem to start pretty quickly right after the midterm elections. And you know, of course, the elections here in New Mexico are equally important. But yeah, things just keep getting busier and busier as we head towards Election Day.
Yeah, it's always election season. It reminds me, I've seen Christmas decorations at my local Sam's Club, and it's not even Halloween, much less Thanksgiving. And it's always election season, it seems, in America.
Yeah, well, before we get into the governor, the COVID situation as it's unfolding, there is plenty, Halloween candy and Halloween decorations have, of course, been in the stores for many moons. We haven't decorated or anything at the Gessing household, and not many folks have so far, but that'll be right around the corner. That's, of course, the next major holiday.
But I'm sure there will be no trick-or-treating.
Well, that's what I was going to get at. As the parent of three small children, and, two of them are smaller. But anyway, I know Los Angeles County, I believe it was, initially had tried to put the kibosh on trick-or-treating. I don't know if our dear leader, Governor Lujan Grisham, will attempt to do the same thing. But I am definitely concerned that she will try to, or successfully, stop trick-or-treating. And certainly hope that folks around our state and the city of Albuquerque come up with some innovative or not so innovative solutions. I think trick-or-treating on its surface is pretty darn safe, but I'm just waiting for that line in the press conference coming up soon where the governor tries to put the kibosh on Halloween. And it will not be a good day around the Gessing household, I assure you, if that happens.
Yes, I am looking for that day, so I'm going to, I'm not a big predictor. It's one of those, but just given the track record, that just seems like something that's too easy to not do, So it's like the Grinch who stole Christmas, the governor who stole Halloween. Yeah. You heard it first, although I'm sure plenty of people have been thinking about that, so.
Yeah, well, maybe it could be another song in the offing for our friend there. We did have a press conference last week. There was a little bit of news on the education front. Basically, while it's a little bit haphazard, districts across the state are getting into the swing. Some of them, more of them, are having at least some form of students show up in person. The contrast could not be starker between Rio Rancho, which apparently students went back today, at least on a hybrid schedule, basically half the week on, half the week off. APS, of course, remains out in virtual option until the end of the year. Pretty different across the state. Some of the southeastern New Mexico counties are still not able to reopen. But the main thing that I took away from the governor's press conference was when she said in the Q&A period, so this is pretty deep in the press conference. That's one of the things, KKOB and a lot of radio stations and even TV stations cut away from these press conferences when they run long, as they are wont to do. They are very lengthy affairs. But the governor said in response to a question that theaters, entertainment centers, and bars will likely not open in New Mexico or reopen in New Mexico until there is a vaccine. That is indeed quite frightening. And I get the impression from that statement, because basically what she is saying by inference is that she is going to keep at least certain sectors of the economy. We are going to be receiving new health orders from the dear leader until there is a vaccine.
Yes, and how effective does that vaccine need to be, Paul? Because not all vaccines are effective. How many people need to get it? Yeah, I that is disturbing. One of the entertainment centers, there was a pretty good article in the Albuquerque Journal with regard to bowling, and
Right?
just the death of bowling in New Mexico is potentially at hand, given that with the exception of the one new place there off of I-25 that's a large corporate, these tend to be small businesses that are rapidly going down the drain. And when I say they're small businesses, they are, but that doesn't mean they don't have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars invested in their facilities, and to be not be able to open at all for such a long period of time is I don't know. I think I run out of adjectives to describe it, how difficult that is from a business point of view.
Yeah, and of course you're referring to Main Event, which is a big company. They have offices. They have entertainment centers with bowling alleys in numerous states around the country. Of course, as I mentioned, I was in Ohio last week for the Labor Day holiday, and they have a Main Event out there, which has been open for a few months now. Things are much more normalized. Dave and Buster's, Cliff's Amusement Park. The list is long. Like you said, small businesses, bowling alleys, and again, I don't know what you do if you're the, there's a book called Bowling Alone, one of the greatest sociological books ever, talking about the decline of community in America. And this is from the 90s, how people were bowling alone theoretically. And well, now we're not even able to bowl alone, whatever group you may want to take bowling. And if you're some kind of professional bowler, or you're somebody who aspires to be in some kind of competitive bowling situation, tough luck unless you can get one of the Pelosi specials or the MLG specials there, get a deal from some bowling alley that's not going to set you up on their webcam, as Pelosi said, that she got set up by her security cam, the security cam in the
Not
salon.
set up by her own actions, set up
No,
by
no,
the
no,
security
no,
cam.
totally not her fault. Totally,
No.
no. Anyway, it just, of course, Cliff's Amusement Park is a family favorite. We've, of course, reached the end of summer. It is obvious that they will not be reopening this year in terms of rides in the water park and all those kinds of things. There's no way. So I'm just hoping for next year. I think several months ago we talked about and considered that it's not just Balloon Fiesta 2020 we have to be concerned about. It's Balloon Fiesta 2021. It's State Fair 2021. Will there be a vaccine by then? I think it's anybody's guess. Trump certainly acts like he's got one in his back pocket ready to go before the election. That's going to be his October surprise. Of course, on that note, talking about the vaccine, Kamala Harris was quoted recently as basically saying she doesn't trust Donald Trump and his administration to get a vaccine to market in time. And that vaccine situation is very fraught on both sides. There's people who have a lot of skepticism about the vaccine situation on the more conservative side, to say, look, we shouldn't be forced to take a vaccine. Of course, some on the progressive side, Kamala Harris being one of them, says, no, I don't trust Trump to get a vaccine to market. So, we're not going to ballpark it here. We're not going to debate whether you should get the vaccine or not, because we don't have one yet. But it really is scary to hear a politician like our current governor saying, we're going to keep X, Y, or Z in place until we have a vaccine. Yeah, it's just, makes me wonder where how some of these businesses are going to survive, how some of these events, how our economy is going to survive.
Yes, and there will be a lot that don't. The other issue that I think is going to happen, and it will not happen through the New Mexico courts, I don't believe. I think they've proven that where they stand on the powers of the governor. But there are takings. There is this thing called takings that I believe that there's a great potential for takings, meaning the government can't take your property without compensation. And if you force something to close down, particularly if it's something that's similarly not closed down in many, many other states surrounding you, are you in essence taking that private property from a individual, and therefore as a government do you owe them money? I don't think we've heard the last of that. These suits take a long time. They're in federal court. There's lots of things to be involved, but that could be the check that the state of New Mexico is writing without the ability to cash, as well as if there are some large suits that come about because of how certain things are managed in states like New Mexico.
Well, speaking of writing checks your body can't cash, so to speak, as they
Yes.
talk about people who are prone to run their mouths and get into fights, or boxers, as the case may be. Our governor was on her press conference. It's not really newsworthy that she was on her press conference talking this way, but it was somewhat newsworthy that she was testifying before Congress. Now, I don't know if you got to watch this testimony. It's a long way. I've testified before Congress. You sit there in a large room with people on a dais, typically Congress people, one or more of them. And that is not what they're doing. It is much more like a Zoom meeting, and it takes a lot of the aura away from congressional testimony. But that's exactly what Governor Lujan Grisham did. The testimony itself was blah, to say the least. It was basically, we need more money. New Mexico needs more money. And Washington, you need to provide more money. Orange man bad. And
Money,
please
green,
send money.
please send money.
Yeah, it was not a whole lot there, but it really does point to that strategy, so to speak, a strategy where the governor is hoping upon hope that either she can hornswoggle Donald Trump and the administration into getting something, cut before the election for political reasons that he feels like he's going to benefit politically as we head into November, or maybe both, that Biden gets elected, and that as soon as Biden comes into office, that he starts cutting checks to all the states to make their budgets better off. And of course, that involves massive federal debt beyond what we've already achieved as a country. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about the governor and her testimony and the plea for more federal dollars.
Oh, I think you handled it pretty well. The whole key is that, my mom used to say it's all fun and games until somebody gets hurt. Well, with regard to Washington spending, it's all well and good until the currency crashes around us. And we've talked about that a little off and on over account that Mexico has some of the strictest gun laws anywhere on the face of the earth. Does that mean Mexico doesn't have any guns?
Legislature, unless the Republicans make some significant inroads because of the loss of some of those moderates, like the aforementioned John Arthur Smith, like Clemente Sanchez, Mary Kay Papin, et cetera, et cetera. And they may not be moderate on a lot of the fiscal issues that we care about, but they're definitely moderate about those cultural issues like gun rights, et cetera. So we'll see. I certainly think the legislature could act, but there's an election between now and then, and we'll see how that shakes out. Now, I previously mentioned APD's police chief Geyer, and he was given the heave-ho by Mayor Keller. I think that it was surprising in the sense that we don't know what exactly precipitated it. There was no specific event, given some of the issues we've seen in Albuquerque, including the riots back in June, the Oñate statue mishandling, either the mayor himself and his political advisors or Geyer. Somebody screwed up, and maybe that's part of the equation here, but I don't know. And I talked to Channel 4, KOB News, recently about this issue. Normally, policing and the nitty gritty is not really a part of what the Rio Grande Foundation gets involved in. But when the police so objectively fail to enforce basic property rights, to defend businesses, especially those downtown, which saw bricks and all kinds of stuff, windows broken, still a lot of graffiti, cardboard, plywood set up downtown, and just a lot of damage and a lot of businesses really impacted. Not to mention the shooting at the Oñate statue, which is City of Albuquerque property at Albuquerque Museum, that the police should have been defending, should have been making sure that rioters, protesters, whoever you call them, whatever they are, don't destroy property that's owned by the taxpayers of the city of Albuquerque, that we have a proper discussion about what these statues mean and what should be done with them or not done with them. Anyway, so I make specific note that the next APD police chief needs to be focused on those property rights issues, as well as trying to do a better job of just policing the laws of Albuquerque to make sure that public safety is enhanced and we don't have so many killings and property crimes, et cetera, et cetera. So I was the counterpoint to a Black Lives Matter individual, and he didn't say too much, except for that he thinks Keller's doing a great job, which, needless to say, I don't. But Wally, I know anyone in Albuquerque follows the issue of policing, and this was one of those issues that it was great to have a chance to weigh in on something that's very important, because policing, if you're not defending property rights, you don't really have an effective police force.
Yeah, crime is such a huge issue for any city, and it certainly is for Albuquerque, given our track record with violent crime, auto thefts. There's a couple of things that I think that would be in the top of the news every day were it not for the COVID, and that is oil prices and what that's doing to the state budget, as well as the Albuquerque and New Mexico crime situation. And we still do have a problem with crime. The other issue with regard to crime that I'd like to make is I've done quite a bit of reading, and there's this idea that somehow there's this big distinction between property crime and other crimes, or violent crimes and nonviolent crimes. And there's a lot of analysis, statistics, and data. Pardon the pun, because these are hopefully not the same ones used to fight the COVID virus. But the fact is that lawlessness is lawlessness, and somebody who breaks a law, steals something, is much more likely to be involved in drugs. If you are an embezzler, you're much more likely to commit violent crimes. So it's not like there's just these nice little pockets of crime. And the fact that property crime's a huge part of it. And just call to mind what's going on in the city of Albuquerque downtown. Downtown Albuquerque, it's hurricane season. We're ready for the hurricane because it's all boarded up down there.
Right.
And, with COVID, the fact that a lot of those businesses down there are restaurants or those that require the public and either are only open at 25%, or in the cases of the bars, can't even be open. It is bad. It's beyond a 1-2 punch. It's like either the riots and the destruction of property or the COVID enough would probably be enough to kill many of those businesses. You layer them on top of each other, and for many of them, it's game over. They're gone. They will not be coming back here to Albuquerque.
Yeah, it's definitely a concern, and I think too many libertarians fixate on nonviolent crime, and just because it's nonviolent crime doesn't mean that it's not a problem or that it shouldn't be enforced. I do think victimless crimes are a different issue.
And that's an important distinction to make between that.
Yeah, and a lot of drug crimes, certainly marijuana possession or whatever it is involving some of these drugs, tend to be more victimless, and we could have a full debate on that, but definitely just because it's non-violent, throwing a brick through a business window is considered a nonviolent crime, but I think that is much more violent than a lot of people give it credit for. Either way, we need to have police chief and an administration that are focused on addressing very, very real crime issues here in the city of Albuquerque. And speaking of some folks who are at least talking about addressing some of these issues, and rarely does I think a effort when you actually sit down and look at it look a lot better than when you just give a superficial look to it. But in the case of the Respect New Mexico, and you've seen the signs, you've seen Facebook posts and social media posts. Respect New Mexico is kind of this umbrella effort of Republican candidates for the legislature trying to get, right now, mostly messaging, and it's designed to reach out to those squishy moderates, folks who may not contemplate voting for Republican candidates. But they released a specific plan. And again, this isn't a policy heavy initiative. This is much more about marketing. And now they're delving into some general policies. But we took a look at the fair deal, and it's labeled moderate by the media. So it had two strikes against it right from the outset. Of course, moderate, we're a conservative organization, certainly on the fiscal, economic policy side of things, which New Mexico has never really gone down the path of fiscal conservatism in any way, shape, or form. Yes, Martinez didn't spend a lot of money or kept a lid on money in the financial spending during her administration, but she didn't have the opportunity to enact any broad-based reforms. Gary Johnson had a Democratic legislature, and basically for 90 years, there has been no initiative on a broad-based fiscal side of things to enact those kinds of policies. So when people say that some conservative policy failed in New Mexico, that may be one conservative policy along with the dozen or more liberal big government schemes that didn't work out. And then, of course, they blame the one conservative policy. Think Bill Richardson tax cuts. Yes, he cut taxes, but he also gave us the rail runner, the spaceport, massively expanded government across the board. Anyway, the fair deal. So moderate, which it reaches out towards the middle for sure when you talk about the policies. But the fair deal, now, not many history majors, I guess, out there, but the fair deal, Wally, comes to us from the Truman administration originally. You had the New Deal, you had the fair deal, and I think someone had a square deal once or twice in there. But Truman had a very big government impulse. People don't think about that because they think of him as a defense hawk, cold warrior. But on the domestic front, Truman was an ardent believer in things like universal health care and massive new government spending. But it was a 21-point plan with all these initiatives. And it was called the Fair Deal. So I was a little taken aback when they used that terminology. But here's the substance to what this Fair Deal for New Mexico has with it. They talk about protecting people's right to retain more of what they earn. That's always good. That implies some kind of tax cuts, generally speaking.
Or spending, some spending control.
Right. Eliminate the tax on Social Security. That's good. Stop unfair double and triple taxation of small business. That sounds like gross receipts tax.
I was going to say, yes, absolutely.
And reduce or eliminate the income tax on working families. Now, that one caught my attention because once you start talking about eliminating income taxes, even if it's just on working families, which I work. You work, Wally?
I work, and I'm in a family, so maybe
we can dream, but yes. we'll take what we can get. And that would be definitely seen as not a moderate proposal because, of course, the Democrats have been pushing to repeal Richardson's original income tax cuts and go with higher tax rates on income. Professional licensure reform, that's one that we've really been banging the drum for almost alone in New Mexico. There's also, mandatory review of all regulations and elimination of at least one old regulation for each new one added. Very welcome. On crime, protecting the Second Amendment, some others that I'm not so sure about, both in their context and what they would actually do, because again, this is a general policy document. But go online. We have a link to the fair deal for New Mexico over at heirsofenchantment.com. It's
That's fair
interesting
in the
stuff.
sense of equitable,
That's the plan. Yeah.
not good, fair. There's even, what is fair? That's one of those terms that's not very easy to describe. Fair is in the eye of the beholder, but these things sound like they're common sense policies that would help the state of New Mexico if they were implemented. So
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
not bad, not bad.
Taken outside of its historical context.
And the double entendre.
Yeah.
It's the fair deal's better than the bad deal. So
It
maybe
is,
that's the
yeah.
alternative.
And we'll just have to see. It is good to see the minority party in New Mexico trying to get behind some marketing, some specific policy proposals. I would like to see more details, more expansion, right to work, school choice. The Republican Party at the national level, you had a great drinking game if you wanted to take a shot every time somebody on the dais said school choice. And I would like to have seen more conversation about that from this fair deal, especially given the times we're in. But it's a B plus. That's my grade.
All right. I can get behind that. And for things that get proposed in New Mexico, that's pretty good.
That is pretty good. Now, I hate to go back to bad news, but here we go. As is usually the case around this time of year, 'tis the season, so to speak. The chill finally comes into the air, although we had more than a chill last week with that crazy windstorm, and then temperatures down in the 40s in September, early September. But Brian Sanderoff has come up with some polling data that if you care about New Mexico, you probably are either very upset about, like I am, or you think they're pulled out of a body part that shall not be mentioned. And we don't know what the case is, but if these polling data reflect reality, it makes you scratch your head about the entire state of New Mexico and what people actually believe in this state. But we'll see. I'm not giving up anything until the day after the election, and we'll find out more when people actually go to the polls.
Yeah, this polling was indeed very interesting. It shows something in New Mexico. Again, let's just say that this polling is right for sake of argument here. Everything is political in America now. Everything.
Yes.
Everything. I can, the exception will make the rule. So if you want to write in the comments on the Facebook about something that's not political in America these days, have at it. I would love to see what it is. But when it comes down to everything, including how COVID is treated, how much of a danger COVID is, it breaks along party lines very, very predictably. And that's the case here in New Mexico with almost everything that was polled. Huge break along Democrat versus Republicans in terms of what they're thinking in these polls.
Yeah, and the fact that it appears that such a large swath of New Mexicans would default to their party line first and not to their own personal freedom and their own family's well-being and those kinds of things is just maybe an indicator of how overwhelming those political opinions are. And, people may not think this, but when people on the Democratic side of things are willing to adopt free market policies or pro-constitutional liberty policies, we try to be among the first to congratulate them, to encourage them. When Damon Eli, who we disagree with across the board, said we need to reevaluate the governor's powers after COVID-19, I think we mentioned it at the time, and I'll mention it again here. Thank you, Representative Eli, for taking a stand in that regard before the election, and I hope that many more of your colleagues will act after the election. But judged by the average voter of New Mexico, we're doing a great job in this state, and the governor's doing a fabulous job. So why would we even consider reevaluating the power of one individual to hold the life and death of large swaths of New Mexico businesses in her hand? We think this is a great concept.
Yeah, and that came through at least in this polling loud and clear. It's like because there's a lot more Democrats than there are Republicans in New Mexico, and all the Democrats are happy with how things are going. That's how the numbers skew. Uh, Before we leave it, just something,
No, we're just going to dive in.
Oh no, but before we go further in,
Okay.
one of the policy issues, an example of something that both sides really could agree on, which is something that I don't know, maybe this is mine, civil asset forfeiture, what the city of Albuquerque in particular and other jurisdictions around New Mexico were doing, basically taking people's property without due process. That was one that made for, you can call them strange bedfellows, people that don't agree together, but you also say, no, there are these issues that are so fundamental to democracy and to freedom in our country that everyone can get behind those. We're not seeing any of those in this poll, though, unless I read it incorrectly.
For the record, the Rio Grande Foundation was knee-deep in that initiative alongside the ACLU and the Drug Policy Alliance, which tend to be more on the left of things. The Institute for Justice is a national group. So we worked with Susana Martinez in 2015 on groundbreaking civil asset forfeiture reform. And that is a form of taking, by the way, which, back to your previous comment about government taking your business, I think it's safe to say that our governor has been taking the businesses and livelihoods of large swaths, again, of the New Mexico economy. So without further ado, 78%, according to Brian Sanderoff in the Albuquerque Journal, 78% of the likely general election voters statewide said that they support the requirement that face coverings be worn in public settings. 17% expressed opposition to the candidate, to the mandate. Now, in my experience, even just walking down downtown in Albuquerque by our foundation home offices, but certainly up in my neighborhood, out walking the dogs, out seeing families outside, the expressed preference, that's an economics term, the actual reality on the ground.
What you do, not what you say.
The number of people walking around out on the streets, whether it's in your neighborhood or even downtown, with a mask on is not 78%. If you go to Walmart or Sam's Club or Smith's or wherever you go do your groceries or go inside of a building, then I would say it's not just 78%, it's darn near 100%.
Yeah.
But out riding your bike, out on the trails, out in the mountains, wherever it is, this is the place. These are all places where our dear leaders' mandate to wear a mask is supposed to apply. And the fact that 78% say this is all good is an indicator that people are damn near hypocritical when it comes to these mask mandates, because they are not wearing masks. And, Espanola, just to hearken back to that whole debacle for the governor, which still hasn't completely died down. Her press secretary was on Twitter today trashing the mayor of Espanola, but I'm not going to get that far down there. Espanola is a pretty blue area, pretty Democrat safe area. And the fact that the governor, probably rightly, saw very few people, if not no one, out on the streets walking around in Espanola with masks on is an indicator, again, that 78% of people may support masks as a concept, and the governor, broadly speaking, but they do not actually wear the mask. And finally, the famous Onion cartoon, Onion's kind of 1.0 of the fake
Babylon.
news. Yeah, the Babylon Bee. I believe the headline was 99% of Americans support mass transit for other people. Yeah. And this is exactly what we're dealing with here, Wally.
Yeah, and then I do think that when people make, one of the things, not to try to put words in people's mouths who answered this survey, but I do see some subtlety, and you hit the nail on the head. People walking into Walmart, walking into Sam's, walking into Costco, they're all wearing masks. If they're outside and somewhat dispersed, some are, but most are not. And so they're making a kind of, what shall we say, nuanced approach to the mask rule.
You mean they're taking their own personal interests and balancing it with what political leaders and others say based on the science as they understand it? We can't have that. That's
No.
kind of almost like independent thought.
Yes.
All right. Well, Wally, we got to move things right along here. 59% of voters, likely voters, said that they approve of the job Lujan Grisham is doing as governor. 33% said they disapproved. Not surprisingly, that closely tracks 60% saying they approved of her COVID response, 32% disapproved. Now, I'd like to meet those 1% of voters who approved of the COVID response but disapproved of her overall approval, because
what else has there been?
yeah, when somebody is as intimately involved as a politician in your day-to-day life, Bill Richardson was never this omnipresent in New Mexico politics. And, Bill Richardson, much like Donald Trump, likes to be, I believe, as Alice Longworth Roosevelt said, the bride at every wedding, the corpse at every funeral, and something about that. Alice Roosevelt Longworth had a number of great lines, mostly about Teddy Roosevelt. That's who she was originally referring to. But a lot of these politicians really have personalities driven by being the center of attention. And Bill Richardson was somebody who did definitely like to be the center of attention. And he's somebody who people like to be around. Our governor is also in the same boat. She very much wants to be the center of everything and has made herself through the COVID-19. Mayor Keller, now this gets back to the Geyer situation at APD. 60% approve of him, 22% disapprove, 19% couldn't find their head with a hole in the from a hole in the ground. And those are the people who don't have any opinion. But again, Mayor Keller, he's maybe not had the royal screw up of the ART that Barry did, but with the riots and the shooting at the Oñate statue, it would seem that Mayor Keller should not be so widely approved. He's done a pretty mediocre to poor job, and it just really is shocking to me.
Well, a final thought I have, and I know time's running short, is that maybe this shows in the midst of a crisis, people would rather have the devil they know than the devil they don't. And this is just a way of expressing that. It's like, yeah, they may have a lot of the same reservations we have, but deep down they're like, do I want to vote for somebody that I don't know what they would be like? I'm not sure. So these were surprising, because if you were to look at these polling, you would think that New Mexico's in the upper quartile of all the positive state demographics and ratings, and we are far from that.
Well, there's only one poll that matters. Thankfully, these do not. That is November, and folks, it's going to be all about turnout. Hopefully, the other side is honest with their views and opinions, and they're so afraid they won't go out of their houses. I guess that's why mail-in voting has become such an issue. But it is going to be very important that folks get out there and vote, and I highly recommend doing so on an early voting basis. That's what we do at the Guessing Household every single year. Thanks for listening to this week's show. Make sure to get the latest edition of Tipping Point New Mexico by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. You can post or comment on this and other episodes on Facebook and Twitter, and tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.